Bueno, buenos días. Simplemente a los efectos prácticamente de dar paso a Verónica, no hace falta mayor presentación entre nosotros ya de Verónica. Verónica, en todo caso, es profesora en la Universidad de Birmingham y esta es casi su casa y espero que en el futuro su casa, de tal manera que es ya muy conocida entre nosotros y espero que lo sea todavía mucho más y podamos hacer muchas cosas juntos. Para esta vez, para estas sesiones, nos proponemos 2 seminarios. Hoy es el primero de ellos. El tema de hoy es The Permutation Password and the Dilemmas of Legal Normativity. Así que todo tuyo y muchas gracias por estar aquí de nuevo.
Bueno, Jordi, muchísimas gracias por esta invitación. Estoy encantada de estar aquí, un gran honor. Bueno, lo que vamos a hacer es lo siguiente hoy. Voy a leer la ponencia en inglés, después vamos a discutir un poco, voy a resumir el contenido de la ponencia y vamos a seguir esta pequeña hoja que les he dado en español y después toda la discusión la vamos a hacer en español. ¿De acuerdo? Entonces, por favor, gracias por... Lamento mucho no haber podido traducir la ponencia, pero espero puedan seguirla. Y esto es una suerte de experimento. Vamos también a seguir las ideas del artículo, la vamos a seguir con las imágenes, ¿sí? Entonces van a ser una especie de conejillos de India hoy ustedes, ¿sí? Vamos a ver cómo sale el experimento. Entonces este es el capítulo primero de un libro que estoy escribiendo sobre la normatividad jurídica. El título de este primer capítulo es The Promulgation Password and the Dilemma of Legal Normativity. Law as a Process. Reflections on the nature of law often focus on either the concept of law, the functional kind of law, the term legal, the definition of law, the common denominator of property that constitutes what law is, or a set of propositions about law in general or the laws of a specific legal system. These scholarly engagements give priority to a theoretical understanding or explanation of the practical nature of law. This ensures that law acquires the status of scientific theoretical or interpretive theoretical knowledge, or at least something close to it. However, law is also a practice or an activity which fundamentally involves intentional action. How does the theoretical knowledge of law and the view that law is a practice or activity be unified? The view predominant in modern and contemporary jurisprudence is to assimilate the idea of practice and human action with a theoretical understanding. Legal philosophers have, therefore, assumed a theoretical conception of intentional action which divides intentional action into 2 components. It's called the 2 components model. First, intentional action is explicitly or implicitly understood as a mental state. The psychological properties of mental states are analyzed in terms of other related notions such as acceptance, belief, motive, or desires. Second, intentional action is also examined in terms of its results, which means that the theorist needs to look at what has been caused by the action. Therefore, for example, the action she is legislating is examined as a 2-component model. She wants to legislate and she has enacted a statute, or the expression she, the judge, is deciding a legal case is scrutinized into 2 components. She accepts to apply the law and she has reached a legal decision. Or he is following a legal rule is divided into he believes he is following the rule established by the Traffic Act 1975 and he has stopped at the red light. Or he is obeying the rule that vehicles are not allowed in Holland Park, is examined as he accepts the rule and he has avoided parking his vehicle in Holland Park. This understanding of intentional action overlooks an important aspect of action, which is prior to and more basic than other more sophisticated explanations, and which is represented by the progressive or the imperfect form of verbs. The expression, she is legislating, she is deciding a legal case, he is following a rule, and he is obeying the rule that vehicles are not allowed in Holland Park, have a prior and more naive or basic connotation than that which is expressed in the progressive form of the verbs is legislating, is deciding, is following, and is obeying. Thus, that someone is legislating is different from the mental state she wants to legislate, or the resulted action she has enacted a statute. The action is presented as continuous stages of series of actions, or to be more precise, as a process. But how shall we understand this process that is conveyed in the progressive or imperfect form of verbs? The progressive form emphasizes an aspect of the practice, action and human agency that is not grasped by the two components model of intentional actions. When one attempts to understand an intentional action, one must ask the agent why he or she is X, ing. The response, after being invited to reflect, is not primarily because I accept, I believe, or I want, in brackets. The response, indicating that the agent is in a specific mental state, is a sophisticated explanation that is parasitic on a much more naive or basic explanation. The question why aims to elucidate the reason for the action, which is the intention of the action, invites the agent to reflect and to introspect on her or his actions. The notion intention of an action conveys three core cases: an expression of an intention, the intentional action, and the action with which the action is performed. For example, let us suppose that I intend to make tea and I put on the kettle. You ask me why I am putting on the kettle. I respond that I am boiling water. You ask me why am I boiling water. I respond that I intend to put it into a cup. You ask me why am I pouring the boiling water into a cup, and I respond because I intend to make tea. To the question why I am making tea, I answer that it is because tea in the morning gives me comfort and energy to begin the day. At last, the inquiry as to why I am making tea stops as the reasons for action have been elucidated by my series of answers, which finishes with an end formulated in terms of good-making or desirable characteristics. The purpose of my action to make tea is to obtain comfort and gain energy. It is a description that the agent herself advances in respect of her own actions. The core aspects of intentional action are present in the example. An agent expresses an intention, performs an intentional action, has an intention with which the action is performed. The view is that I do have mental states such as desires of motives, the desire to have a cup of tea in the morning, which can explain my intentional action. The position that I aim to defend is that there is a more basic explanation of action. Intentional action is explained in terms of other actions, and this explanation is prior to other kinds of explanations. for example, psychological features and so on. In our example, the agent provides the description of the action in terms of other actions and in terms of an end as a good-making characteristic, and the latter makes intelligible the action. The description of the action is from the point of view of the person who performs the action. This is called the deliberative point of view. The question why invites a reflection and elucidates the reason or reasons for the action. A theorist, however, might say that the agent has a mental state and intention that causes her to put on the kettle, boil and pour water, and that there is a cup of tea that is the result of the action. However, this explanation does not grasp the practical character of the deliberative point of view, where the deliberator or agent does not observe or assess his mental states in order to act. Rather, he looks outward to the world, to the kettle, the plug, the on-off button, the boiling water, the tea bag, the cup, and so on. Law is not only a concept, but it's also a process in the aforementioned sense. It is a process like making tea, with a successive series of actions performed by officials and citizens. But in what sense we say that law is a process? When one follows the law, one follows a set of publicly ascertainable legal rules. Law imposes on us certain behavior, and one does not choose to act as one chooses to make tea. There is an element of intentional action when one follows the law, and arguably it might seem very different from other intentional actions such as making tea. Let us think about a legal example. To the question, why are you turning the wheel of your vehicle, the man might answer that he's turning his car around in search of a parking space. To the question, why are you looking for a parking space, the man might answer that he intends to avoid parking in Holland Park. To the question why he is avoiding parking in Holland Park, the answer might be because there is a rule that prohibits vehicles parking in Holland Park. In our example of tea making, the action is divided into a successive series of actions, and the totality of these stages constitutes a process that finds unity in the final end or reason for action. In the legal example of avoiding parking in the vehicle in Holland Park, the action is also divided into stages that find unity in a rule. However, the similarity between the two kinds of activity only goes so far. In the case of the intentional action of making tea, the final end makes intelligible the series of actions. But in the case of the intentional action of avoiding parking a vehicle in Holland Park, the deliberator has expressed thus that it is because of a rule. To say because of a rule is different than to say because of X as a good-making characteristic. What is the good-making characteristic of a rule? How can it make intelligible the action? One might answer that the answer because there is a rule is satisfactory, and that the question why one ought to follow such a rule is an external question to the game of following rules within a legal system. According to this view, the theory's perspective should prevail, and actions as following rule should be explained according to the two components model. A similar theoretical answer was provided by Hart. According to Hart, there is an analogy between the rules of a game and following the rules of law. One accepts the rules of games when one plays them, chess, cricket, and so on. Therefore, when one follows legal rules, one accepts such rules, or at least accepts a rule of recognition that establishes their validity and should consequently be followed. The legal philosopher following hard and using the two-component model of intentional action will say that he is turning the wheel and avoiding parking in Holland Park because he believes or accepts that there is a valid rule which states that vehicles are not allowed to park in Holland Park. On the other hand, the action caused by the intention, which is conceived as a mental state of avoiding parking in Holland Park, can be observed. Therefore, it can be subject of theoretical understanding. Within the two-component model, the answer to the question, why are you doing X, turning the wheel, reversing the vehicle, and avoiding parking in Holland Park, makes perfect sense. Because there is a rule, vehicles are not allowed to park in Holland Park, and therefore I avoid parking in Holland Park. Yet, this response is only partially intelligible. According to this view, the deliberative point of view needs to be explained and unpacked as it is explained either as an acceptance or the belief that there is a rule. Any inquiry about the validity of such rule is an external question. We do not need, therefore, the description provided from the deliberative point of view to understand the aspect of the law characterized as a practice or activity. The deliberative point of view collapses into a theoretical point of view. In other words, the point of view of the person who performs the intentional action collapses into the point of view of the person who aims to theorize or explain the action. I reject this latter view and aim to defend the idea that the point of view of the person who performs the action is irreducible and has priority over the point of view of the person who theorizes, explains, or interprets the actions. Furthermore, I argue that there are limitations to the theorizing of the deliberative point of view. The latter, therefore, remains primitive and asymmetrical with respect to the theoretical point of view. The descriptions in terms of reasons for actions as a response to the question why may be called a naive explanation of intentional action. I advance arguments that support the priority of the naive explanation of intentional action to explain the phenomenon of following legal rules, and show that we follow legal rules only because we are following reasons for actions as good-making characteristics. Three puzzling questions arise from these reflections. One, first, are legal rules reasons for actions? Second, how can legal rules become a reason for action and be part of our practical reasoning, preserving the deliberative point of view? Third, if legal rules are reasons for actions, should they not be formulated in terms of good-making characteristics? Plausible answers to these questions are the focus of the rest of this book. This chapter will concentrate on refining the formulations of these questions. The promulgation puzzle. Let us suppose that two people are playing a game of chess. The players have been instructed about the rules of the game and explained their actions in terms of the rules of the game. The actions are intelligible to us because of the rules of the game. Let us imagine three possible explanatory perspectives of a game of chess. A, the perspective of the players. B, the perspective of the person who has just entered the room, understands well the rules of chess, and explain the actions of the players to another observer. And C, the perspective of someone who has just entered the room, who has never seen chess before, who does not understand the rules at all, and wishes to provide an explanation of the actions of the players. For reasons of simplicity, let us call B the rule-knowing observer, and C the rule-ignorant observer. observer. The perspectives of B and C are theoretical in the sense that neither the rule-following observer nor the rule-ignorant observer are performing the action. Rather, they aim to explain the action. How can we proceed to an understanding of the perspectives of the players without theorizing their perspectives? An invitation to the players to reflect on their actions seems to be the best possible strategy. We begin with asking the question, why? This consequently obliges the players to reflect on what they are doing. The ensuing dialogue between us and them might be as follows. Enquirer asks, why are you moving the knight? Player says, because I intend to move my queen into the space currently occupied by my knight. The enquirer could ask, why do you intend to move the queen? The player will answer, because I aim to put my opponent into checkmate. Why do you intend to do so? Because this is the main rule of the game. You need to put the other player into checkmate in order to win. From the point of view of the rule-knowing observer, the explanation of the actions of the player might not differ substantially from the dialogue we just have illustrated. This theorist may therefore state, he is moving his knight so that he may move his queen in order to put his opponent into checkmate. This is because these are the rules of the game of chess. From the point of view of the rule-ignorant observer, fewer options are available. One option is to take the hermeneutical or interpretive point of view and understand the actions of the player from the point of view of the player. However, this latter approach tends to collapse into the two-component model. The Verstehen point of view is a mental state as interpreted by the theorist, a belief or a desire. Thus, the formulation of his explanation of the player's action will be something like this. He wishes to play a game and knows, accepts, and follows the rules of such a game. He is playing a game. The interesting and intriguing question that I wish to investigate is why the explanation from the deliberative point of view, the point of view of the person who performs the action, and the rule-knowing observer do not, in most cases, differ. The explanation from the point of view of the agent who performs the action following a rule and the explanation of the rule-knowing observer might be the same. And this enables us to say that if we can understand and explain the internal aspect of games, rules, then we can understand the intentional action of following rules as if it were from the point of view from the deliberative point of view. I will call this position the symmetrical view, as it considers that the deliberative viewpoint and the point of view of the rule-knowing observer are symmetrical. According to this view, it seems that the theories can replicate, study, describe, and analyze successfully the perspective of the deliberator or agent. Yet, the explanation from the point of view of the agent or deliberator and the explanation from the point of view of the rule-ignorant observer differ in many cases. The solution provided by the symmetrical view seems very appealing, especially when one compares with the situation of the rule-ignorant observer, who will in many cases provide mistaken views of the internal aspect of games, as he can only interpret the internal aspect, the rules of the game. He needs to infer such knowledge from his different beliefs and observations of the behavior of the players. However, the symmetry between the rule-knowing observer and the deliberative point of view is an illusion. Let us suppose that I am running in the park, and you ask me, with intention to elicit the reason for my actions, why am I running in the park? Our dialogue might be as follows. Why are you running? Starts the inquirer. To catch the bus, I answer. Why are you catching the bus? To go to my office. Why are you going to your office? I intend to do my job. Why do you intend to do your job? Because I ought to earn money. The difference between the case of the runner and the case of the chess player is that in the latter case, the rules which provide the end of the action and make intelligible the successive series of actions are transparent to both the rule-knowing observer and the agent who performs the action. We say that the chess player has formulated as the end of his action the rules of the game of chess. Outside restricted and transparent rules, reasons for actions rather than rules prevail, and the understanding of intentional action gains complexity. The reason for action is only transparent to the person who performs the intentional action. In the case of the runner, the description of the successive progressive series of actions is provided by his own account or description, and the inquiry as to why he's doing the action is stopped by the end of his action, which constitutes the reason for action. The reason for action as a good-making characteristic, for example, earning money, unifies the successive stages of the action: running, crossing the street, jumping onto a bus, paying the fare, getting off the bus, entering into the office. And consequently, the reason for action as a good-making characteristic is the form of the action. Enable us to make intelligible the action. Enable us to make intelligible the successive series of actions. Prior to the runner giving his description of his actions, in the best possible case, at best we can only have a theoretical account of actions in terms of the beliefs and desires of the agents, intentional actions as mental states, his desire of going to work and his belief that the bus will get him into work. But in the case of the runner, the asymmetry between the deliberative and the theoretical description is very clear. The action is not mediated by rules. According to the symmetrical view, for the case of actions that follow rules, the knowledge of the action from the perspective of the chess player and from the perspective of the rule-following observer are completely symmetrical. Yet a closer look at the case shows that there is no such symmetry. The case of following the rules of the game of chess is not different from the case of the runner, or so I will argue. An asymmetry pervades between both the deliberator's point of view and the observer's, and between the rule-knowing and the rule-ignorant observer. The inquirer, who aims to elicit the reason for action of the chess player, seems satisfied by the answer because it is a rule. But why should this specific rule guide his action? That's the question. Why do players not create different rules? The standard answer is that if they accept different rules, then they will not be playing chess but another game. An answer to the question, why do they have to follow the rules of chess, will be that these rules are the rules that are practiced and they are the rules of chess. Whoever wishes to play chess has to follow the rules of chess. Is this the answer that the agent will give, namely that since he has accepted to have a game of chess, he must, if he wishes to play chess, follow the rules of chess? This is certainly not the answer that the agent will give after having been invited to reflect on his own actions by the question, why? The form of the answer of the chess player will not differ from the answer of the runner. Let us begin examining the dialogue between the inquirer and the player. Dialogue 3. Why are you moving the knight? The player will say, because I intend to move my queen into the space currently occupied by the knight. Why do you intend to move the queen? because I am to put my opponent into checkmate. Why do you intend to do so? Because I intend to put my opponent into checkmate. Sorry, because this is, why do you intend to do so? Because this is the rule of the game. Why do you follow the rule of the game? Because I intend to win. Why do you intend to win? Because I am playing a board game, and board games are about winning and losing. Inquiry, why are you playing a board game which is about winning and losing? Because it will entertain both my friend and myself. For the agent, there is no clear demarcation or border that separates the end of playing a game because of certain good-making characteristics from the end of following the rules of the game. The rules of the game of chess make the game interesting and entertaining, and this is the good-making characteristic that provides the description of the actions of playing the game and following the rule of chess. His reasons are not the rules of the game. The rules of the game cannot describe his intentional action unless the rules are described in terms of good-making characteristics that constitute the game. Then it is not the rules, but the content of the rules that guide the agent. It is not that the agent moves the knight to make a space for the queen because the agent follows the rules of chess. Rather, it is that the agent moves the knight to make a space for the queen because he intends to put his opponent into checkmate, because he aims to win, because he finds it entertaining. Let us imagine the opposite case of a non-intentional action of playing chess. This thought experiment will show us, contrary to the view advocated by the symmetrical view, that the rule-following observer is not able to distinguish between intentional and non-intentional actions of following rules. Imagine that you suffer of regularly sleepwalk, but that your housemate is unaware of your sleep disorder. He is playing chess in the lounge, alone, when he sees you coming out of your bedroom sleepwalking and believes that you are awake. You sit and you both start to play chess. The sleepwalker follows the rules of chess without any anomaly. This is an unconscious behavior. From the perspective of the rule-knowing observer, his housemate is playing chess because he moves the knight and the queen in the right way. The observer, infers from his knowledge of the rules of chess and from the behavior of the sleepwalker that he is trying to put his opponent into checkmate. But the action of the sleepwalker is not an intentional action. However, the rule-knowing observer cannot distinguish between the intentional and the non-intentional action of playing chess. He cannot make such a distinction because he does not rely on the description provided by the agent, in this case the player, which unifies the successive progressive steps of intentional action. The rule-following observer mistakenly believes the sleepwalker to be acting intentionally. A similar mistake will be committed by the observer who does not understand the rules of chess. For the rule-ignorant observer, the sleepwalker has the desire to play, accepts the rules of chess, and believes that he is playing chess. Both the rule-ignorant and the rule-knowing observers are obviously mistaken. From the deliberative point of view, there is no knowledge of the action. There is neither belief nor acceptance of the rules. If the sleepwalker is asked why he moved his knight in such way, he cannot reply as he did when he was reflecting on his action. He is, after all, asleep. For the chess player, the justification of the rules and the practice of them is not especially problematic. The question why these rules and not other rules exist and does not arise. He intends to play chess because it is entertaining. Playing chess is justified because he sees the end or purpose of the action as good or desirable. He does not raise questions about the promulgation of such rules because his will is directed to the act as a good-making characteristic. The end of his action as a good-making characteristic is to be entertained. What is entertaining, the rules or the game? We can say both, since the rules are the game. He has therefore reasons to play the game and follow the rules. But who has made these rules? He might ask. Why not make other rules and subsequently create another game similar to chess? Let us call it chess asterisk, which will be even more entertaining. Apart from the difficulties of creating a new game and new rules that will guarantee an entertaining game, there are obvious advantages in playing by the current rules of chess rather than by the rules of chess asterisk. For example, the existing rules have been practiced over many centuries. It could create confusion if we try to introduce new rules, and we would consequently have to spend time teaching and writing down the new rules. By contrast, in the case of the law, the pattern of promulgation arises. Legal rules are created and imposed by officials, and officials themselves and citizens let their actions be guided by them. What does it mean to say that officials and citizens are guided by legal norms or rules? We have shown that law is a process, not very dissimilar from making tea or running to catch a bus to work. Law is not only a process, but also a practice. If law is a practice, what kind of practice is it? Is it like chess in the sense that it can be applied to whomever accepts the rules? In the case of the law, we can put forward many reasons as good-making characteristics for the acceptance of rules, such as enable us to be free, enable us to coordinate our activities, or enable us to procure our own interests. Hart implicitly advocated both the symmetrical view and the two-component model of intentional action. And he asserts that there is no need to examine and evaluate the reasons for actions as good-making characteristics. This is so because the mental state of the acceptance of the rule of recognition or rules will guide us into the internal aspect of rules, and subsequently will enable us to understand, describe, and explain intentional action and in its internal aspect. If the symmetrical view is false, and I believe is false, then the naive explanation of intentional action, namely the explanation of action from the deliberative point of view, will have priority over the two-component or sophisticated explanation of intentional action. The naive explanation of intentional action gives access to an internal aspect of rules that cannot be grasped by the two-component model. The will of the chess player was engaged in the action, not because of the convergence, agreement, or acceptance, or common practices of the rules of chess, but rather because it is entertaining, because there is a good-making characteristic that constitutes the reason for action. The chess player did not examine the acceptance, desire, or agreement of the other player. He aimed at the good-making characteristic of the chess game. Would the legal agent, the person who performs successive legal actions, need to identify good-making characteristics that will make intelligible his intentional actions in the context of the law? From the point of view of the agent, the legislator, the judge, the citizen, the question that arises is why I should be guided by these specific legal norms or rules. The Hartian answer, because there is a rule of recognition that both is accepted from the internal point of view and gives validity to the other rules of the legal system, overlooks the fact that the notion of acceptance is parasitic upon the idea that the action is guided by reasons as good-making characteristics. So I'm not saying that there is no plausibility on the explanation of acceptance. I'm just saying that it is parasitic on the naive explanation. If qua legislator I am legislating, qua judge I am deciding, qua citizen I am following legal rules, should not my intentional action, in order to be intentional, be guided by an end as a good-making characteristic of the activity or process? In this respect, the most controversial legal process or activity is neither the legal decision-making nor the legislating, but rather the idea of following legal norms or rules. The book will concentrate mainly on the latter, but I envisage that the conclusion of this book can be extended to the activities of legislating and judging. The dilemmas of legal normativity. The authoritative and normative nature of law obliges us to confront the nature of the will and intentional action. We see ourselves as active selves when we deliberate, decide, and act. These functions are part of our active selves as opposed to our passive selves when we are driven by our inclinations, feelings, and desires. In the former case, we are under the control of our actions, but in the latter, we have not chosen or decided anything. Something just happens to us. The contrast between the two seems at first glance rather crude. Only animal appetites are the plausible subjects of our passive nature, since most of our desires are either subject to some kind of reflection or entail some type of cognition. When we love someone, we have a strong desire to be with them and are driven by this desire, even though we have the rational capacity to reflect on our desires. This stark and crude opposition between our active and passive selves helps us to understand that there are happenings and doings, and that the latter require reasons for actions and agency. The opposition also explains another dichotomy, the internal and external. When we act, we do, decide, choose, and the result, actions come from us, whereas happenings just happen to us and come from outside. In some sense, they are external to us. Law, however, enjoys a peculiar nature. We act as citizens according to the law of the state, but law is external to us. Law has a directive nature, since it guides our actions. Furthermore, when law makes claims on us, requests, demands, or commands, we are bound by these requests, and we say that law is normative because it has a force on us. However, to preserve our active nature, this force must come from us rather than be external to us. The crucial question is how law can request, demand, or command us to do certain things while we are still active selves. How can something that is external to us have a normative force upon us? In other words, in what sense is law's normativity compatible with our self-conceptions as active selves, since positive law is something that is imposed on us rather than something we decide or choose or to endorse? Some authors have argued that in the legal context, our self-reflective and active nature plays no role at all. This view has been advocated indirectly by sanction-based explanations such as that advanced by Austin. We, citizens of a state, Austin argues, do not choose to act according to the law. We are merely coerced by sanctions. The idea of law's force can be explained by the idea that law exercises coercion on us. I think that also Kelsen has this view. There is no notion of justified legal normativity in Kelsen. There is only the notion of coercion. Therefore, law's force comes from outside us, and the problem of the compatibility of law's force, law's normativity, with our active and self-reflective nature is an illusory problem. There is no normative dimension. There are only facts, sanctions. However, our self-understanding as law-abiding citizens, in clear contradiction to the Austinian approach, is in terms of legal rules that impose and create duties and obligations on us. We ought to pay taxes, fulfill our contractual promises, and so on. If I sign a mortgage contract with a lender, the contract has created an obligation for me to pay back my mortgage, according to the terms agreed in the contract. The capacity of legal rules to impose and create duties and obligations on us, if these duties and obligations are genuine and are legal, involves the idea that our active selves must play some role. However, we have seen that the form of intentional actions, typically of process such as legislating, deciding cases, and following legal rules, where there are successive series of actions, is given by the description provided by the deliberator or agent himself. The I concept, or the first-person perspective, plays a primary role in understanding legal activities. Psychological or social facts cannot fully grasp this internal aspect of law. In other words, the deliberative point of view. We are faced with, therefore, the puzzling conflict between our perception as active selves and the authoritative and normative character of law. This conflict has been called the moral puzzle of legal authority. The moral puzzle states that there is a conflict between the authoritative and normative character of law, a heteronomous force on the agent, and the reasons for actions that the agent from the deliberative viewpoint has. Why should the agent surrender her judgment to a normative power? There is a tension here between personal autonomy and the normative and authoritative power of the law. What some authors have called possibility puzzle, Shapiro, is a corollary of the moral puzzle. Authority seems impossible because norms are the outcome of the human will, since they are a human creation and they cannot therefore confer legitimate power to obligate. If we assume that there is a basic authoritative norm that confers power on legitimate authorities, we enter an infinite regress, as it could similarly be assumed that there is a more basic norm that gives power to the basic norm. As Shapiro describes it, we get the egg-chicken paradox. We have learned above that the theoretical point of view cannot fully grasp the active features of ourselves. If the theoretical point of view is to play a role in the understanding of the authoritative and normative power of law, then it will be as parasitic upon the deliberative perspective. We need then to engage in an investigation of the nature of the will and intentional action. Have we conflated the two different ideas of legal authority and legal normativity? When we refer to the authoritative character of law, we refer here to the way in which legal rules are part of the practical reasoning of the legal agent or deliberator, whether that be judge, official, or citizen. In this sense, we say that law guides and regulates the deliberation of the agent. This is a narrow view of authority, as it only considers the force of the law from the point of view of the agent or deliberator. A wider question includes considerations such as how a legal system is authoritative, how the factual authority becomes legitimate authority, and how the institutional character of law explains legal authority, and so on. But I think these questions are parasitic of the primary question, how the authoritative nature of law enters into the process of the deliberator of the agent. The idea of legal normativity refers to the question of how legal rules are related to reasons for action. Reasons for action track values or good-making characteristics, and values are located in the world, including our social world. We have the capacity to respond to value facts and therefore to reasons. Insofar as we respond to reasons, we are rational. For example, case 1, I help a woman who is trapped in a car in a traffic accident. A value fact, the life of a human being, gives me a reason to rescue her. Case 2, I pay piano lessons for my daughter because music is beautiful. The value fact that music is beautiful gives me a reason to pay for piano lessons for my daughter. Reasons for actions are elicited through reflection when one aims to answer the question, why? In the case 1, the imaginary dialogue to elicit reflection may be as follows. Why are you stopping the car? To get out. Why are you getting out? To run to the accident. Why are you running towards the accident? I intend to help the person who has become trapped in her vehicle. Why are you helping this person? I intend to assist her so that her life may be saved. Why do you intend her life to be saved? People's lives are valuable. Then of the intentional action to save a person's life has a good-making characteristic, and the series of successive actions has an intelligible form for us because of the formulation of the reason for action as good-making characteristic. We now say that an explanation of normativity is an explanation of what reasons are, how we respond to them, and so on. Normativity also alludes to what is possible as opposed to what is actual, and in most cases centers not on what we actually do, but on what we ought to do or what we possibly could do. Its reference points are the division between the actual on the one hand and the bad or the good on the other. We are now in a position to formulate the two main dilemmas that will guide our inquiry. The first is called the rule-reason dilemma, and it states the following. If legal rules should be followed merely because of their acceptance, convention, or practice, then we have no reasons to follow legal rules. In this case, the requirements of legal rules have no importance, and worse, could in some circumstances be irrational. If rules provide reasons for action, then rules are redundant. Therefore, legal rules are either irrelevant or irrational, or on the other hand, they are redundant. The second dilemma is the dual nature dilemma. If law is a social activity and is therefore intrinsically social, and if reasons include value of facts, which are not necessarily social or socially constructed, then law cannot be reason-giving. Therefore, there are no reasons to follow the law. If law is a social activity but can at the same time be normative, then the sociability of law is not intrinsic or primary, but derivative of our personal normative commitments. Either law is intrinsically social, but there are no reasons to follow the law, or there are reasons to follow the law, in which case it is not intrinsically social. The intellectual intuition behind the idea that law is at once a social activity and normative is that the source of this normativity of law is an internal act of the will, an act of endorsement or avowal. Our rational capacities enable us to endorse or commit ourselves to following the law. Law is only an expression of this personal normative commitment. We decide and we choose collectively to be regulated by law, and therefore this act of endorsement creates no reasons to follow the law. This view was the predominant one amongst 18th, 19th, and 20th century contractualists and conventionalists. This view contains a grain of truth. If normativity lies within the domain of what possibly could or should be done, then the active self plays an important role. Therefore, there must be something active, such as the will, that determines how we are bound to what is normative. If this view is sound, how can this internal act of the will be also social? Do we need problematic notions such as collective will or the will of the sovereign to explain the normativity of law? Chapters 2 and 3 aim to provide an answer to the rule-reason dilemma, whereas Chapter 4 will concentrate on advancing a model whereby the dual nature dilemma is dissolved. Thank you very much for your attention.